Hi, my friends. Welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State, my daily blowing expression of anger at the pre-media news and telling you the truth about what really is going on. The whistleblower who was planted by the FBI, not really correct to call him a whistleblower, the undercover agent, who was planted by the FBI in the Russian Iranian bribery scandal. I mix up Ukrainian and uranium. They're the other side scandals. The one who was planted there, according to Peter Schweitzer, who is the author of Clinton Cash, who first broke this entire story of the uranium deal. It had previously passed unreported in the media. And in his book Clinton Cash, he spelled it out for the first time. He says that the undercover FBI agent who witnessed all of this and learned all about it and reported his findings to Mueller and to Comey at the FBI, who remained silent about it, has an audio tape of discussions by Russian officials of the bribery of the Clinton Foundation. He said on Hannity's show, "Well, look, Sean, I've always felt that the evidence was very clear. And I don't know what that hesitation at the State Department at the Justice Department is all about. There were several factors that no one debates. Number one, you have the Kazakhstan uranium minister in a 2010 video deposition describing in great detail how Bill and Hillary Clinton shook him down and shook down the Kazakh officials to compel them to give uranium assets to Frank Giustra, who is the founder of Uranium One. Nobody disputes that. That is clear. Fact two, we now have the whistleblower that has come forward who reportedly has audio recordings of Russian officials talking about using bribery to get favors from the Clintons, giving donations to the Clinton Foundation. That has yet to appear, but I think it will be pretty strong. The third ingredient we have is the actual flow of money, tens of millions of dollars to the Clintons as this deal was going down. Now, we don't have his testimony yet, the whistleblowers or the agents. He was bound by a gag order from Loretta Lynch, the previous AG, but Sessions has now lifted that, and he's going to appear shortly before one of the Senate Intelligence Committees. Probably Chuck Grassley's, and we anxiously await that testimony. In the meantime, get this. Hillary Clinton said she would be personally offended by any designation of a special prosecutor to investigate her. She said, "I deeply regret that this appears to be the politicization of the Justice Department and our justice system. This Uranium One story has been debunked," that's her new favorite term, "countless times by members of the press, by independent experts." The hell it has. Nobody has given any evidence to debunk it. The debunking is that there's been a story that Hillary was not present when the deal was approved by the committee. But that doesn't matter. Her assistant was there. She was in charge of the process, and it was her role to block the appeal, the approval, and her assistant voted for it. It is nothing but a false charge that the Trump administration is trying to drum up in order to avoid attention being directed at them. I mean, even Trey Gowdy said that there needn't be a special prosecutor. I have to check that out. She continued, "It is personally offensive that they would do this. But taking myself out of it, this is such an abuse of power, and it goes right against the rule of law. And if they sent a signal that we're going to be like some dictatorship, some authoritarian regime, where political opponents are going to be unfairly, fraudulently investigated, that rips at the fabric of the contract we have that we can trust our judicial system." Well, that's some statement from somebody who has made a career out of defrauding the justice system and has skated on numerous other occasions. Let me just take a moment to remind you of them. It's so easy to forget it when you're dealing with Hillary. There were two occasions when she narrowly escaped indictment. One was when she denied any role in firing the travel office employees when Clinton took power in 1993. Bill and Hillary wanted them fired. These are the guys that booked travel for the White House, presumably because they wanted to give the business to some campaign contributors of theirs. And Hillary was asked under oath if she directed those firings. And her assistant, David Watkins, who I know well, said she did direct them and there would be, quote, hell to pay, unquote, if the firings didn't happen. Hillary admitted that she urged them to happen, but she said it wasn't in order because she wasn't in the chain of command, and therefore she could not give an order. And the special counsel bought that and didn't indict her on that sole basis. The second, by the way, the charges against the travel office turned out to be false. Secondly, was a more serious one when there was an investigation of a land deal called AIDC, which had another name, Castle Grande. And that deal was one in which McDougal, the head of the Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan Association, had been ordered by the feds never to do any more real estate deals using his bank to finance them, where he personally was involved. So he got a hold of his lawyer, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and she arranged for Webb Hubbell, her law partner's father-in-law, Seth Ward, I think, Ward, to be the front man in the deal. And then at the end, McDougal would come in and buy him out. That was illegal. It was defrauding the Justice Department and violating a court order. Hillary was summoned before a grand jury and asked about it. And she said, I did no work on the AIDC real estate deal. And Starr, the special prosecutor, knew it as the Castle Grande deal. He never heard of AIDC, Arkansas Industrial Development Commission, the other method of referring to the deal. And on the difference between those two words, he felt he couldn't indict Hillary because he couldn't prove that she knew what Castle Grande was. I knew what Castle Grande was. Everybody did. And she absolutely just got away with it. Now she's facing another option with this special prosecutor, and we'll see if it comes about. My suspicion is that what's happening is that Sessions has asked his staff to look into it, and they're going to investigate it and probably report that there would be grounds for a prosecutor, and there probably will be one eventually appointed. Now, that raises the other question about Mueller's investigation of Trump. He recently had an interview with Hope Hicks, who was Trump's really closest personal assistant and has been for many, many years, and really a personal secretary, but much more advanced than that. She's currently, I think, the acting White House communications director. And she was interviewed, and Adam Goldberg, a former Clinton White House lawyer, said, anytime you get someone who is the right-hand person or who's been around the primary target of an investigation under oath answering detailed questions, it means you progressed very far along in the investigation, raising the possibility that perhaps Mueller's investigation is terminating, and that would be very good news for everybody. In the meantime, Simpson, who is in charge of Fusion, the company that got the contract from Hillary to investigate Trump and to frame this dossier pretending that he was in collusion with the Russians, was interviewed by the Senate committee. And he said several things. First, he said that Steele did not pay the sources for the dossier. That contradicts directly what Steele said under oath in a deposition at the libel suit going on in Britain. Secondly, he said nothing from the dossier has been disproven and some of it has been corroborated. Totally untrue. About a third of the dossier concerns the trip of Michael Cohen to the Czech Republic to negotiate the collusion deal. Cohen was Trump's lawyer. And Cohen has proven that he didn't go. It's not in his passport. He never left the United States during that period. And the only stuff that's been, quote, corroborated is conversations within the Kremlin among Russian officials who claim to have discussed the possibility of intervening to help Trump in the election. And even if there was an intervention to help Trump, that's far from evidence of collusion. The Russians intervened, for example, to help Nixon get reelected in 1972 and to defeat Nixon in 1968. They're often intervening in U.S. politics, but they don't do so with the collusion of the ultimate victor in the election. He said the broad assertion of the dossier findings that Russia waged a campaign to interfere in the election is now accepted as fact by U.S. intelligence. That is not the fundamental fact in the dossier. The dossier goes way beyond that and says the intervention was done with the complicity and collusion of Donald Trump and his campaign. And there is no evidence that has ever been proven about that at all. And that is the real conclusion of the dossier. To pretend it just was to show that there was Russian efforts is a deliberate misrepresentation so that you can say the dossier is kosher when in fact it's not. CNN also reported earlier this year that U.S. investigators have corroborated some aspects of the dossier, specifically that some of the communications among foreign nationals mentioned in the memo did actually take place. And that, again, is the conversations among the Russians about intervening in the election. And what does that do? It has nothing to do with Donald Trump at all. So it's very different from the dossier we're supposed to know about.
Ronnie Mick wants to know, is it true that there is over 1,000 indictments at this point, with Hillary being the center of it all?
No, not to my knowledge. To my knowledge, there are 3 draft indictments that have been written out by special prosecutors in the archives that they are not releasing. They were never brought, but they were drafted.
Okay. And Roger Winter asks, do you think Sessions is in over his head as Attorney General? It sounds as though he can't make a decision.
No, I don't think that yet. We have to give it a little time. I think that Sessions is proceeding one step slowly. In other words, if you race ahead with a conclusion, let's say you're +1. If you go exactly where the evidence would lead you, let's say you're 0. And if you're one step behind the evidence, which is you got to wait till it matures and is reported, maybe you're -1. And that's where I think Sessions is. I think he knows that investigating Trump's opponent is a big deal. He knows that investigating a defeated presidential candidate is an even bigger deal. And he knows that he's going to be widely criticized for that. And the Justice Department is. And he better make damn sure that there's grounds for it. And that he's gone through all of the procedural niceties and dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's before he moves. And that's what I think is going on now.
Jeffrey Erickson wrote in and asks, do you think that the Senate will pass a tax overhaul by Thanksgiving or Christmas and sign off on the corporate tax at 20% and make it retroactive for 2017?
Well, to predict congressional outcomes is perilous. To do it with a time frame is ridiculous. The House today passed the tax cut, thank God, and it included the repeal of the Obama mandate. So really, the House has just voted to kill Obamacare and to pass the tax cut, the top 2 priorities of the Trump administration. I believe the Senate will eventually pass both of those, and maybe by Christmas, hard to tell, but certainly relatively within the next few months. And I do think that the corporate tax cut will go into effect roughly immediately, maybe not all of it at once, but some of it at once and all of it eventually. What's going on now is the way the legislative process is supposed to work. And it hasn't worked this way either under Obama or under Trump so far. What's happened in the past, recently, is one house passes a bill and the other house holds its nose and either votes it up or votes it down, but doesn't try to change it. What's happening now is the House and the Senate are passing 2 very different bills, but have basically the same contours in common, just different dates, different amounts, and different percentages, different numbers. And they are going to pass those bills. The bill will pass the Senate. It just passed the House today. And then it'll go to a conference committee, which is the senior members of both houses, and probably Trump will have a representative there too. And they will hammer out the details and negotiate compromises. In fact, what they'll do is shop draft bills around to the various Republicans who voted no or are leaning no, and say, if we did this, would that bring you on board? If we did this, would that be okay? And they'll fashion a bill that can pass, hopefully with all Republican votes, but at least with some of them. One good example was yesterday, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, said that in its current form he wouldn't vote for this bill. And what he was saying was that too much of the income that pass-through businesses receive would be taxed at the higher rate rather than the lower rate, and he wanted that to be changed. That's a statistical matter of a few points one way or the other, and that'll be negotiated, and he's articulating his reservations in a draconian form to get the attention of the writers in the taxes and Senate and House committees, who up to now he doesn't feel have given him enough attention. But that'll all happen in the conference committee, and I think it's very likely that it will pass. December is not a totally unrealistic time frame, but maybe off by a few weeks. And I'm not sure all of it will be immediate, but most of it will be, and all of it will eventually happen.
Dick, Shane Clary asks, how much is a tax cut going to hurt charities?
Well, the only reason that the tax cut should hurt charities is that it eliminates the need to itemize your deductions, because once you don't have the state and local tax deduction, the income tax deduction, and you don't have all of the property tax, you just have it up to like $10,000. A lot of wealthy people are not going to itemize their deductions. Why should they? They could just take the standard deduction and it would be fine. And if you don't itemize your deductions, you do not get a separate deduction for charitable giving. And therefore they're worried that a lot of wealthy people will not itemize their deductions and therefore will reduce the amount they give to charity. Well, that may be so, but it's up to the charity to be attractive enough and important enough and its operations to be transparent enough so that the donors are willing to give money anyway, even if there's no additional tax benefit from it.
Lynn Rogers asks, I wonder if Senator Manchin might sign on the tax reform.
Manchin will vote for that bill if everybody else does. If the bill is guaranteed to be passed, it's set in stone, he'll vote yes so that he can run for re-election claiming to be an independent. But it's totally phony. Now, what was interesting about the passage of the tax cut in the House is that only 13 Republicans voted against it, and up to 22 could have, and it still would have passed. A lot of times in the House and the Senate, but more the House, members are given permission to vote against what the administration wants. And they literally sit there with a list of congressmen, and when they get up to 22, they say no more. Everybody has permission, but nobody else. And then members come in and they say, you should give me permission and take it away from him because he's reelected 5 times and he wins with 70% of the vote. I'm a marginal member. I have a tough race. I should get an advantage. And then the leadership will say, well, you got a point. And they'll call up the other congressman and say, we want you to vote for this bill so that Joe Blow here can vote against it and still get reelected. You know that's happening when the maximum number of people vote against it, but the bill passes anyway. In other words, had 22 Republicans voted no, which is just the most that can do it, and still have the bill pass if all the Democrats vote against it, you know that that's what's happening. But the fact that only 13 voted no and 22 could have means 9 members could have voted no, but chose not to, which means that this is a legitimate no vote, not just a phony one, and it's very good news for the bill. Now, Al Franken, I guess you've heard, has been accused of sexual harassment and groping by Leanne Twedine, a radio anchor for Los Angeles' KABC, their major talk radio show. And the allegation is twofold. They were working together on a Saturday Night Live skit. And in the skit, Franken wrote it. And he wrote it that Franken's character, meaning Franken, would go up to Leanne and would kiss her. And he played that scene, and Leanne played it. But instead of just a kiss, he put his tongue down her throat, and he grabbed her at the back of the head and pushed her to his lips and kept it for a long time. And she said she was just sickened by that. In other words, it wasn't a Hollywood kiss. It was a lover's kiss. And secondly, touring the Middle East to visit and entertain troops, Franken went over to Leanne while she was asleep and grabbed her breasts And there's a photo on the front page of Drudge that he took of him doing that. And his excuse is this was obviously meant as a joke, because he's sort of hamming it up for the camera. But Leanne didn't think it was quite a joke. And she's complained about this. And it's now going to an investigation. Franken, the most hypocritical statement you can imagine, said he wants a full investigation. In other words, I want your committee to investigate what I did. I want you to tell me what I did. And that's ridiculous. And really, the Democrats are now turning on Franken. They're so worried about these charges of sexual harassment that when you make them, they run screaming. Debbie McCaskill, Sarah McCaskill, Claire McCaskill, the senator from Missouri, a Democrat, has refunded $30,000 to Franken that he gave her for her campaign and re-election. When Democrats start turning back money from other Democrats, you know that they take this scandal very seriously. Franken is up for re-election. He's a marginal senator. Norm Coleman, the former Republican, who ran against him and lost very, very narrowly the first time. It was a recount that went on for several months, and he lost by, I think, 120 votes, is going to run against him, and all this gives him a very good chance of winning. So we might lose a seat in Alabama, I doubt it, but we might, and we might pick one up in Minnesota, the ebb and flow of politics.
Speaking of inappropriate behavior, Lorraine Blair wants to know, what do you think about the news that Joe Biden had inappropriate behavior?
Yeah, I mean, and apparently a lot of it. Aunt George Bush 41, a woman just said that he groped her while they were at a White House photo event. Now, Clinton would do that all the time. I know a number of people who posed with him in photos and reported feeling him grab their rear. And that apparently was a normal operation at the Clinton White House. Never grabbed mine for some reason, but I apparently went after this girl hammering tongues. Now, we have a petition that we posted on the site. It's on now, right?
I'm not sure if Jerry's posted on this video yet, but he has posted it yesterday. He posted it.
Okay, we'll have him post it now.
Yes.
And it's on dickmorris.com. And the petition is to demand that Congress release the names of the senators and the congressmen who were convicted of sexual harassment, where the Senate and the House, from taxpayer money, paid their fines. I've reported this a while ago. The initial report comes from Cal Thomas, the great columnist. And he wrote that $15.2 million have been paid out in 350 claims by women who were sexually harassed or abused by members of Congress. And under the terms of the agreement, the victims sign non-disclosure agreements. And the Congress is not calling for those to be revoked. Kristen Gillibrand, who's trying to masquerade as a feminist, rushed to the rescue and placed in a bill courageously calling for counseling and education to teach members about sexual harassment. Yeah, right, and the birds and the bees, too. The point is that Congress should reveal the names of the members who sexually harassed other people, Democrats and Republicans, and the amount that they were paid by our money. They didn't have to pay it from their own pocket. It was paid by taxpayer money. So please sign this petition. We'll send it to Congress, and we need to put them on the spot to get these names revealed and released. Now, Roy Moore's scandal deepens, and I'm withholding judgment a little bit on this because, again, I don't have all the facts. Nobody does. And I like Moore. I advised him in the campaign, and I met with him in Alabama. Now, the latest developments cut both ways. On the one hand, another woman has come forth, represented by Gloria Allred, the all-purpose instigator and propagator of sexual harassment claims. She makes a living off it, an attorney from Los Angeles. And she has this woman as producer who says that Moore raped her or tried to rape her, and that he actually physically advanced toward her, grabbed her, and did all sorts of obscene things. stopping short of actual rape, but moving pretty close. And she, in a teary statement, said that she didn't want to report this, but it happened. And but today, her stepson said she's a total liar, a money grubber, and that she probably was paid for this, and not to believe a word she says. That's interesting. And then also in this woman's yearbook, Roy Moore's signature appears. And Moore said he didn't know the woman, he never knew her, never heard the name, never heard of her. But yet there's Roy Moore's signature in her yearbook. And the issue is it a forgery or not? And Allred refused to say whether it was a forgery or not, and refused to submit it for handwriting evaluation. So that's another thing we need to take account of. In the meantime, it looks like the Republicans are losing that seat. In the latest poll, which was taken by the Republican Senate Committee, which doesn't mean it's unbiased, that's McConnell's poll, but at least it's not a Democratic poll, shows the Democrat now 12 points ahead of Moore in Alabama. That contradicts the two previous polls. One showed Moore 11 ahead, and a week later showed Moore 6 ahead. This one shows Moore 11 behind the Democrat. And as I said, it's suspect because it was done by McConnell's people who hate Moore. But still, it's dangerous. The election is December 14th, I think, or 17th, or one of those dates. And that could be a problem. If we lose that seat, it could be very serious. So let's stay with this and let's follow it up and listen to the evidence as it comes in.
Dick Henrietta Simon asks, do you know if the House tax bill got rid of the Obamacare mandate?
Yes.
Great.
Which is the death of Obamacare.
Excellent. And William Martin wants to know, what is happening with the Imran Awan House testimony?
The guy who hacked espionage the Debbie Wasserman Schultz computer. I don't know. I haven't seen anything the last week or two or three, but obviously that's going to be an important investigation. Now, Sessions has come out of his trance, and he has warned 29 U.S. cities in Colorado, New Mexico, Vermont, Mississippi, Kentucky, Washington, California, Massachusetts, Florida, Oregon, New Jersey, New York, and the states of Illinois, Oregon, and Vermont, warning them that they are facing cutoff of federal law enforcement assistance funds because of their refusal to turn over the names of illegal immigrants who have been convicted and imprisoned for violent crimes. And as they are released, Justice Department, Immigration wants their names so they can deport them, and wants them at the jailhouse so they can be physically arrested. And these 29 cities now refuse to do so, claiming it violates their sanctuary status. And Sessions, in a very good statement, said jurisdictions that adopt so-called sanctuary policies also adopt the view that protection of criminal aliens is more important than the protection of law-abiding citizens and the rule of law. Absolutely. There was a case in New Haven, which I was involved in getting it publicized, where a guy from Haiti, an illegal immigrant in the United States, 20 years ago, killed somebody, murdered somebody. He was tried and convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison, and an additional 4 years in prison on a weapons charge. After he served the 20 years, he applied for probation on the weapons charge, and it was granted to him. And he was released from jail, and he went out and violated his probation. They arrested him, they locked him up, put him back in, released him, and then he was, again, not taken into custody by the government. Actually, this time they took him in, tried to deport him, but Haiti refused to take him back, so they released him on the street. This happened a third time. They released him, and this time he murdered somebody. And they arrested him. Haiti refused to take him back, and he's now serving, thank goodness, a life sentence in a federal prison in Connecticut. But that's a great example of this. And what you need to do is when these violent criminals leave prison, they need to be arrested on immigration charges and deported to their home countries. And if the home countries refuse, the United States should impose trade sanctions on those countries until they accept those people, and in the meantime, keep those folks locked up. Now, in addition to that, so that what's happening now is that the cities are saying, we're not going to abide by the law, we're not going to turn those names or those people over to the feds. And Sessions is saying, you are going to lose federal funding. And at stake is $2 billion under the Byrne, it's called the Byrne Law Enforcement Assistance Act. I don't know who Byrne was. But it's $2 billion that goes directly to police departments around the country. And those police departments are going to lose that money. And if that doesn't change their behavior, Trump will probably tack other fines onto it. So this is the beginning of the end for the sanctuary cities policy. Thank goodness.
Dick, Hector Morales wants to know, isn't McConnell trying to scare the Alabama voters?
Yes, he is. And he's trying to get them to dump more. And he says he's doing it so that the seat will remain Republican. But I suspect there's also a big element there of wanting to embarrass Steve Bannon, his arch rival, who endorsed Moore and helped campaign for him, and to punish Moore for running in defiance of McConnell's diktat, which was that his opponent, Luther Strange, should be elected as the senator. Now, this video, as others, was sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. And what is interesting in the last, what's interesting in the last few days is that, sorry.
This one?
Next one. Thank you. Is that gold prices have moved up again because the dollar is moving down. And as more people lose faith in the dollar, they increase their holdings in gold. I've explained that there's been a sea change this week in that China has announced that it will redeem yuan, their currency, for gold, making it the only place in the world outside of a gold mine in your backyard where you can actually get gold in return for currency. And more and more nations are probably going to pay for their oil in yuan because that way they can the yuan can be redeemed for gold. And it's increasingly likely that gold will rise in circulation and more gold in the currency, and therefore the price will rise. So you should contact the Patriot Gold Group and try to get in on the ground floor on this really global policy shift that's going on.
Dick, Jerry wanted me to let you know and let the viewers know that the petition is posted in the Deep Six Facebook page just below this live broadcast.
Okay.
It's also on your public page as well.
Good. Okay. Now, one of the things that's escaped notice is in the tax cut bills of both the House and the Senate, the AMT, the Alternative Minimum Tax, is being eliminated. Now, AMT is the opposite of ATM. ATM, you get money. AMT, you lose money. The Alternative Minimum Tax was passed a long time ago, 15 or 20 years ago, as inflation was putting more and more people into higher and higher tax brackets. And it was supposed to be some way in which that could be adjusted. But instead what it says is that if you make more than $132,000 in your household, you have to fill out a complete form of all of the deductions you would want to take, and then calculate on the alternative minimum tax what tax you would pay without deductions. And whichever is higher, you then have to pay. And it's a very long form. It takes a long time to fill out. And many, many people are now being covered by the AMT, who are ordinary middle-income people, as opposed to the very wealthy people. See, when the bill was passed, $132,000 was a heck of a lot of money, the equivalent of 2 or 3 million today. And as a result, many people are ensnared by this, where the intent was only to ensnare really rich people who would deduct everything and escape without paying any taxes. But that has now been eliminated in the tax cut, a very, very big deal. Trump just issued a statement today saying that the next step in the Congress's actions should be welfare reform. and reinstating the welfare reform that Bill Clinton passed. Obviously, I'm very interested in that because I helped pass it as well. And what happened is that in the welfare reform bill, we included we meaning Congress, included a statement saying that only that people had to work to get benefits. And the only form of work that would be acceptable was work. It wouldn't be tuition at a college for training. It wouldn't be job training. It wouldn't be a community college. It wouldn't be any variety. It had to be an actual job, either by the public or the private sector. And Trent Lott, the Republican leader with whom I was negotiating, said, I am determined to make this as foolproof as we can so the Democrats can't screw with it. And he passed the amendment to the bill that said this requirement shall not be waived, shall not be superseded, and shall not be amended by the administration. In total defiance of that law, Obama emasculated it by saying any kind of job training, even back of a matchbook job training, would be acceptable. And as a result, the number of people who have to work to get their welfare benefits has dwindled sharply. This bill would reinstate that requirement with all of its teeth and might extend it to other forms of relief, like food stamps and Medicaid and other various welfare programs. Bear in mind that right now, about 31% of the American people get welfare of one form or another. Very few get actual welfare, but many get Medicaid, many more get food stamps, housing aid, other kinds of stuff. Not Social Security, Medicare. Those are defined as entitlements. Those are things you get because you're 65 or over, not because you're poor. But the means-tested entitlements are 31% of the population. The work requirement applies now to only about 3 or 4%, and this bill would probably raise it. So almost everybody there would be subject to a work requirement, and that really will bring down welfare rolls and help undo the trend of the Obama administration, which was fewer and fewer people getting a paycheck and more people getting a handout.
Anthony Trump, Trump, wants to know, what will America do when Europe builds a European army outside of NATO and builds an arsenal within Europe with European construction and people, cutting America off?
That's not going to happen anytime soon. The Europeans don't want to spend the money. There were only 3 or 4 countries in NATO that have the defense budget equal to 3% of their GDP or more. That was the standard the United States urged. We're at about 5.5%, and most of the ones are way below that. I think France is equal to it, but Germany's not, Britain's not, and most of the NATO countries are not. And they're simply not going to do that. They're not going to raise it to that level. They also are not going to develop the nuclear arsenal necessary for that defense. France has it, Britain has it, but neither have been willing to put it under NATO. And NATO is not about to build it up on its own. So don't lose sleep over that.
Right now, we're number 2 most viewed Facebook live stream in the world.
Good. That's
currently.
Great.
Yes.
Well, if enough senators commit sexual harassment, we could be number 1 by the time this broadcast's over. But it is time to end it. And any other urgent ones? Or we'll do them tomorrow.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. We have a couple of shout-outs, though.
Yeah. To Kathy Robinette Johnson and Leota Hines.
And I'm going to tell you why we're shouting out.
Okay.
Okay, so Kathy Johnson wrote in, "You are awesome, Mr. Morris. Thank you again for information put in layman's terms. You are a gem."
Thank you.
And Leota Hines says, "Dick, you are better than the 6 o'clock news of long ago. Thank you."
Thank you. I'm Walter Cronkite. That's the way it is. And selfie of the day is Jeffrey Bazard, who lovingly refers to me as Uncle Dick. Well, thank you. Thank you, nurse. Thank you, nephew Jeffrey. Take care. I'll see you all tomorrow.